So, I want you to just picture this for a second.
Okay.
It's August 28th, 1963. And you're standing in this massive, sprawling crowd.
Right.
Like, over 250,000 people are just packed shoulder to shoulder on the National Mall in Washington, D.C.
Just an ocean of people.
Exactly. And the late August summer heat is, I mean, it's absolute. It's unrelenting, radiating right off the reflecting pool.
And you have to remember, people are wearing full woolen suits.
Yes. Men in wool suits, women in their Sunday best, literally fanning themselves with whatever scrap of paper they can find.
It sounds exhausting.
It really does. And you're looking up toward the towering marble steps of the Lincoln Memorial, just, waiting.
Waiting for a moment that would change everything.
Right. You are about to hear what the journalist Sean O'Grady of The Independent later called, and this is a big claim, a speech with a strong claim to be the greatest in the English language of all time.
Which is really saying something.
It is.
Yeah.
Because it is, of course, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. As you stand in that sweltering crowd, you have absolutely no idea about the backstage chaos.
Oh, the chaos was unbelievable.
I mean, the frantic late-night hotel room rewrites or the sheer undeniable luck that actually preceded this exact moment.
You're completely in the dark.
Right. And you certainly don't know that the most famous words of the 20th century weren't even in the script.
What's fascinating here is that it truly is one of the most incredible stories in American history. And so much of what we think we know is, well, it's actually just the polished mythological version of events.
The textbook version.
Exactly, the textbook version. Today, we have this massive, comprehensive stack of historical and rhetorical source material that breaks down exactly what happened before, during, and after that moment.
Which is the whole point of this deep dive.
Right. Our mission today is to move entirely past those famous 10-second sound bites we've all heard a million times in school or, seen on television every February.
The clips everyone knows by heart.
Yeah. We are going to explore the surprising, really piecemeal origins of the speech.
The heart-stopping last-minute improvisation that saved it.
And the deeply divided political reactions it instantly sparked across the spectrum.
Yeah.
Plus the honestly bizarre modern legacy it holds today.
There's a lot to cover.
It is. We are looking closely at not just what was said on those marble steps, but why it worked so flawlessly and exactly how it was built from the ground up.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to really understand the sheer magnitude of the speech, we have to start with the original plan.
We do.
And if I am reading our sources correctly here, the original plan was definitely not the I Have a Dream speech we know today.
Not even close.
I mean, the leaders of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom were walking this massive political tightrope.
They were walking a tightrope without a net. You have to remember the political context of the summer of 1963.
Which was incredibly tense.
Very tense. The organizers of the march wanted to demonstrate mass, undeniable support for the civil rights legislation that President John F. Kennedy had just proposed in June.
Okay.
But Kennedy's administration was actually quite terrified of this march.
Terrified? What terrified?
Because they feared it would turn into a massive riot.
Right.
And if a riot broke out on the National Mall, that would effectively kill any chance the Civil Rights Bill had of passing through what was a very, very divided Congress.
So they were under this immense pressure from the White House to essentially keep 250,000 rightfully angry, disenfranchised people completely docile.
Precisely. The strict directive for the speakers that day was to keep things calm.
Keep it steady.
Yes. They specifically wanted to avoid provoking civil disobedience.
Which is wild because civil disobedience had been their main tool.
Exactly. Up to that point, civil disobedience was the primary, most effective hallmark of the civil rights movement. Think of the sit-ins.
The freedom rides.
Right. But for this day, the organizers were saying, look, we need to show strength, but we need to show absolute discipline.
No getting arrested today.
None. Because of this, Dr. King's original design for his speech was meant to be a highly formal, incredibly structured homage to Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address.
That makes sense, given the location.
Yeah, it was specifically timed to correspond with the centennial of the Emancipation Proclamation. It was supposed to be a dignified, almost academic reflection on history.
Okay, that makes total sense on paper. But what really blows my mind in these sources is the timeline.
The timeline is stressful just to read about.
It really is. I think when most of us imagine monumental historical moments like drafting a speech that will literally echo for eternity, we picture these great leaders sitting in quiet, candlelit studies.
Right, isolated from the world.
Yeah, carefully agonizing over every single syllable for weeks on end. Consulting a thesaurus, looking pensively out a window.
What's fascinating here is how far from reality that romanticized image actually is.
It's basically the exact
Yeah.
opposite.
It is. The sheer weight of the logistical burden the organizers were carrying simply cannot be overstated.
Because they were building a temporary city?
They were coordinating the largest political gathering in American history up to that point, and this is before the era of cell phones.
No email.
No email. No modern event management software.
You're talking about charting thousands of buses, scheduling special trains.
Figuring out how to feed hundreds of thousands of people.
Portable toilets, security protocols, coordinating with the local D.C. police, handling the press.
Yes,
Yeah.
all of it. It was overwhelming. So this speech was being drafted with the assistance of Stanley Levison and Clarence Benjamin Jones in Riverdale, New York.
Okay.
And Clarence Jones later gave a profoundly revealing quote about this exact process.
What did he say?
He said that the logistical preparations for the march were so incredibly burdensome that the speech itself was simply not a priority for them.
Not a priority. The most famous speech in history.
Oh, I know. They were drowning in the logistics of the event. It was so overwhelming that on the evening of Tuesday, August 27th.
Wait, Tuesday the 27th? The march is the 28th.
Exactly. Literally 12 hours before the march was scheduled to begin in Washington, D.C., Dr. King still did not know what he was going to say.
12 hours. I really want you, the listener, to just imagine that for a second.
It's anxiety-inducing.
Imagine you are prepping for the absolute biggest, most consequential presentation of your entire life.
The whole world is watching.
Millions of people are going to be watching you on national television. The President of the United States is going to be scrutinizing your every single word.
Your entire movement is on the line.
Right. Your entire life's work culminates tomorrow morning. And you are so completely bogged down by the event planning, the metaphorical catering and seating charts that you haven't even finished writing the script the night before.
It is a level of pressure that would break almost anyone.
I would crumble.
Most people would. They're in this hotel room, exhausted, the heat is likely sweltering, and they are frantically pulling together an amalgamation of several different drafts.
Just trying to find a cohesive narrative.
Trying to find something that works.
And what really struck me in our research is the original title for this stitched-together draft.
The title is so telling.
It wasn't I Have a Dream. It was called Normalcy Never Again.
Yeah.
That title completely changes the tone of how we view this moment, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Normalcy Never Again sounds far more militant.
It has an edge to it.
It does. It's structured around a specific, hardline political demand rather than a soaring, unifying vision of the future.
It's like a line in the sand.
Exactly. It was a threat to the establishment. We will not allow you to return to the status quo.
Oh.
Ultimately, very little of that normalcy speech actually ended up in the final delivered version on the steps of the memorial.
Though it is an incredible piece of history in its own right.
Oh, absolutely. And you can still find a physical draft of Normalcy Never Again housed today.
Where is it?
It's in the Morehouse College Martin Luther King Jr. collection down in Atlanta.
So we have the staggering paradox here.
Yeah.
One of the most perfectly constructed, famous speeches in human history was, in many ways, a logistical afterthought patched together at the 11th hour by exhausted men in a hotel room.
A literal all-nighter.
But if the draft was called Normalcy Never Again, where on earth did the dream part come from?
Good question.
I mean, did he just make it up out of thin air the next day on the podium?
No, not at all. That is where we really have to look at the architecture of the speech.
Okay, let's look at it.
Because while the final draft was thrown together at the last minute, the core concepts, especially that famous dream motif, had actually been incubating for a very long time.
It wasn't just spontaneous.
Right. It wasn't just born spontaneously on the National Mall. If we trace the historical record back, we see Dr. King testing and refining this specific idea for years.
Kind of like a comedian.
Exactly. Much like a stand-up comedian tests material in small clubs before filming a massive stadium special.
I love that analogy. You don't just walk out into a stadium with brand new material. So where does the dream first appear in his public remarks?
The earliest major instance we have in the sources is from 1960.
So 3 years prior.
Yes.
Yeah.
He gave a speech to the NAACP titled The Negro and the American Dream.
The seed is planted.
In that address, he discussed the glaring gap between the American dream and the reality of the country for Black Americans.
Right.
He pointed out how both overt white supremacists and the general apathy of the federal government had deeply scarred that dream.
Okay, so the foundation is there.
He even suggested, quite profoundly, that the Negro might be God's instrument to save the soul of America.
Wow. So the thematic foundation is totally there 3 years early. This idea that America has a dream, but it's currently unfulfilled, and it's going to take a specific movement to actualize it.
Exactly. And that incubation process continued steadily.
How so?
By 1961, he was speaking nationally about the student activist dream of equality as an unfulfilled American dream.
Building on the theme.
But the physical structure, the actual rhythmic refrain of the words that we all know today, really starts taking definitive shape in late 1962.
Right. Our sources mention a specific high school.
Yes. On November 27th, 1962, he gave a speech at Booker T. Washington High School in Rocky Mount, North Carolina.
And this is honestly one of my favorite little historical side quests in our sources today.
It's a great detail.
The text of that Rocky Mount speech was actually much longer than the one he gave in Washington.
Considerably longer.
But large portions were absolutely identical, explicitly including the repeating "I have a dream" refrain.
Verbatim in some places.
But for decades, nobody could actually hear it, right?
That's right. Amazingly, the audio recording of that 1962 Rocky Mount speech was basically lost to history.
Just sitting somewhere.
It sat in box for over 50 years.
That is wild.
It really is. It wasn't until it was rediscovered in 2015 and painstakingly restored by an English professor at North Carolina State University that we got to hear it.
Wow.
Finding that tape was like finding the rough draft of the Mona Lisa.
Oh, totally.
It allowed historians to actually hear King working out the pacing, the inflection, and the rhythm of the words 9 months before Washington.
It's incredible that historical artifacts like that are still just sitting in boxes waiting to be found.
Makes you wonder what else is out there.
Right. But he didn't stop in North Carolina. Our sources show he kept honing it, getting to bigger and bigger stages.
The stages got massive.
In June of 1963, just 2 months before the March on Washington, he delivered a massive speech in Detroit at Cobo Hall.
The Detroit speech is a crucial stepping stone. This was right after the Great Walk to Freedom, which was a monumental event in its own right.
How big was it?
It drew a crowd of 125,000 people.
Huge.
Inside Cobo Hall, he stood before 25,000 people and delivered the "I have a dream" refrain once again.
Testing it on a massive indoor crowd.
And it is worth noting the deep ties between the labor movement and the civil rights movement here.
Oh, right, the UAW.
Yes. During this time, Walter Reuther, the powerful head of the United Auto Workers, had actually given Dr. King an office at Solidarity House in Detroit,
Really, just gave him an office.
just so he could have a quiet place to work on his speeches.
Which again highlights that speech writing requires space, time, and support, things he desperately lacked the night before Washington.
Exactly.
That Detroit speech was apparently so powerful, and the crowd reaction was so electric that Gordy Records actually released it.
Gordy Records, which was founded by Berry Gordy of Motown fame.
Right. They released it as a commercial LP titled The Great March to Freedom.
This is how truly great communicators operate.
They refine.
They do not write something in a vacuum, read it once, and hope it works on the big stage. They incubate.
They test the waters.
They test specific phrases, pacing, and emotional beats with different audiences over months and years.
Yelling it out.
They gauge the crowd's reactions, feel the rhythm of the words bouncing off the walls of a gymnasium or an auditorium, and refine the delivery before the stakes are at their absolute highest.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Yeah.
Because as we trace the history of these phrases, we realize that the brilliance of the speech wasn't just Dr. King's solo, isolated genius.
No, it wasn't.
It was deeply collaborative. He was pulling together threads from across the entire civil rights movement and historical American oratory.
The concept of the solo genius is often a total myth in history, and it certainly is here.
It's almost always a team effort.
Always. The speech is a masterclass in synthesis. For instance, the whole idea of framing constitutional rights as an unfulfilled promise.
Where did that come from?
That came directly from the suggestion of his advisor, Clarence Jones.
The same guy who said they had no time to write it.
Exactly. He helped frame the core legal argument of the speech.
And what about the ending?
The ending is fascinating.
That soaring, unforgettable climax where he quotes the patriotic hymn, America, and lists off all the different mountains across the country, shouting, "Let freedom ring!"
Arguably the most famous part next to the dream itself.
Right. That is a huge moment.
Well, that final passage closely resembles an address given by an African-American politician and clergyman named Archibald Carey Jr.
Okay, when was this?
He gave it to the 1952 Republican National Convention.
1952. Over a decade prior.
Over a decade. Both Carey and King ended their speeches by reciting the first verse of the hymn, America.
My country, 'tis of thee.
Exactly. And they shared the exact names of several mountains from which freedom should ring.
Like which ones?
The Stone Mountain of Georgia, the Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. King absorbed Carey's rhetorical structure and deployed it for an entirely new generation.
And it wasn't just older politicians he was drawing from either.
No, not at all.
Our sources point to a much younger, lesser-known activist who might have provided the spark for the most famous phrase of all.
A very crucial figure.
Can you tell us about Prathia Hall?
Prathia Hall is a vital, often overlooked figure in this story. She was a young activist with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC. In September 1962, Dr. King attended a prayer service where she was speaking. And the setting here is deeply important.
Where were they?
They were at the site of the Mount Olive Baptist Church in Terrell County, Georgia.
Okay.
This was an African-American church that had recently been brutally burned to the ground by white supremacists after it was used for voter registration meetings.
Just a horrific, visceral scene of domestic terrorism.
Absolutely devastating. And as young Prathia Hall spoke amidst the literal smoking ashes of that church, she repeatedly used a specific phrase.
She said, I have a dream.
Yes. She repeatedly used the phrase, I have a dream. She used it as a rhythmic anchor to project hope into a scene of absolute devastation.
And King was there.
King was there in the audience. He heard her, and he was profoundly moved by her delivery.
Wow.
Historians widely believe he adopted that specific rhythmic repetition directly from her.
That really gives me pause.
Oh, powerful.
The most famous phrase of the 20th century was essentially born from a young woman standing in the ashes of a burned-down church.
It really highlights the deeply collaborative, shared nature of civil rights rhetoric.
The movement's voices were constantly intermingling.
They were inspiring, borrowing from, and elevating one another. It was a collective voice.
It wasn't just one man on a mountain.
It was an oral tradition operating at the highest level of political stakes.
Which brings us back to the actual delivery of the speech on the afternoon of August 28th, 1963.
The moment of truth.
We have the context, we know the exhausting night they had, and we know the rich history of the words. Let's set the scene for the listener.
Paint the picture.
It's late in the afternoon. You, the listener, have been standing out in that sweltering Washington heat for hours.
And there are no shade trees where you are standing.
None. And according to the official program, King is the 16th out of 18 people scheduled to speak that day.
Think about that level of audience fatigue.
I'd be ready to go home.
By the time King finally steps up to the podium, the crowd has been listening to speeches, logistical announcements, and music for virtually the entire day.
They are exhausted.
The energy is really starting to wane.
So he steps up to the microphone, looking out over a sea of humanity that stretches all the way back to the Washington Monument.
A daunting sight.
And he begins reading his prepared remarks, the Normalcy Never Again text.
Right, the script.
And honestly, the beginning of the speech is actually incredibly powerful in its own right.
It's very well written.
He starts by invoking those pivotal historical documents, Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation.
Setting that formal tone we discussed.
And then early on, he uses this brilliant economic metaphor. He describes the promises made by America as a promissory note on which the nation has defaulted.
It is a masterful piece of writing.
It really is.
He tells the crowd that America has given the Negro people a bad check. A check that has come back marked insufficient funds.
Such a great image.
But, he says, they refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. They have come to Washington to cash this check.
I want to stop and appreciate how smart that is.
It's brilliant.
He takes the incredibly abstract, complex concepts of constitutional law, systemic racism, and the social contract.
Heavy academic stuff.
And he distills it into something every single working class person in that crowd understands intimately. A bounced check at the bank.
It grounds the high-minded ideals of the March intangible economic reality.
It makes it accessible.
It is a highly effective, structured piece of political rhetoric. It appeals to logic, to fairness, to the fundamental American understanding of commerce and debt.
Right.
But as effective as it is, It is still a formal read address.
He's still looking down at his paper.
And as he's moving toward the end of his prepared text, something shifts. The dynamic in the air changes.
This is the moment of intervention.
The pivot.
And it comes from someone sitting just a few feet away from him. Sitting behind him on the podium is Mahalia Jackson.
A legend.
For listeners who might not know, Mahalia Jackson wasn't just a singer, she was the undisputed queen of gospel.
She was a titan of American music.
And a close personal friend of Dr. King. She'd actually just performed the soaring spiritual How I Got Over right before Dr. King spoke.
Essentially warming up the crowd with immense emotional power.
And crucially, Mahalia Jackson knew about the speech King had given in Detroit at Cobo Hall.
She had been there.
She had heard him deliver the dream motif, and she knew exactly how powerful its effect was on a crowd.
She knew what he was capable of when he let go of the paper.
So King is reading his formal script, talking about returning to the ghettos and the slums, and she shouts to him from her seat.
She just calls out.
She literally calls out to him over the noise of the crowd. "Tell him about the dream, Martin!"
It is one of the most pivotal interjections in recorded history. Tell him about the dream, Martin.
I know I'm supposed to be objective here, but the hairs on my arms stand up when I think about that.
It's electric.
Right there, on live national television, in front of 250,000 people, she yells it out. And King hears her.
He hears her, and he makes an unbelievable pivot.
You can see it on the tape.
If you watch the footage, you can see his body language change. He physically pushes the text aside.
He slides the paper over.
He looks up from the podium. The historian Taylor Branch wrote that King later said he just grasped at the first run of oratory that came to him in that split second.
He just went for it.
He abandons the script, and he starts preaching improvisationally.
The absolute courage that requires is almost unimaginable to me.
Most people would freeze.
Think about the stakes we discussed earlier. The Kennedy administration is terrified of a misstep.
The FBI is watching.
The entire globe is watching. To abandon a pre-approved, politically vetted script in front of the entire world and trust yourself to just fly blind.
It requires immense courage, but it also requires a lifetime of preparation.
That's true.
He wasn't truly flying blind. He was falling back on the years of incubation we discussed earlier.
The rehearsals in Detroit and North Carolina.
What we witness in that specific moment is a profound shift in genre.
How do you mean?
He transitions instantly from delivering a formal political address to delivering a deeply improvisational African-American church-style sermon.
Ah, I see.
Jackson acted as the catalyst. She sparked his transition from a political leader reading a text to a Baptist minister speaking directly from the soul.
And the rhetorical tools he deploys in that improvisation are just a masterclass in human communication.
They really are.
Let's deconstruct the rhetoric here, looking strictly at the text of what he actually said. Because whether he was reading or improvising, he was using incredibly sophisticated techniques.
Absolutely.
First, he leans heavily on a technique called anaphora. Can you explain what that is for the listener?
Anaphora is the deliberate repetition of a word or phrase at the beginning of consecutive clauses or sentences.
Okay.
It is a foundational tool in oratory because it builds a rhythmic, almost hypnotic momentum.
It pulls you in.
Exactly. It helps the listener anticipate what is coming, making them an active participant in the speech.
He uses it early in the speech, right? Repeating "now is the time," 3 separate times. But when he goes off script into the improvised section, he leans into it completely. He repeats, "I have a dream," 8 distinct times. 8 times. "I have a dream that one day. I have a dream that my 4 little children." He builds this relentless, rhythmic wave that paints a vivid, undeniable picture of an integrated America.
It builds and builds.
And he also uses other repeating phrases to anchor his thoughts while he improvises, like, 100 years later, we can never be satisfied with this faith, let freedom ring, and finally the crescendo, free at last.
That repetition gives him the structure to improvise safely. It's an anchor.
Right.
Alongside that anaphora, the speech is heavily layered with allusions. This is another key rhetorical tool.
Let's define that too.
An allusion is a brief, indirect reference to a person, place, thing, or idea of historical, cultural, or political significance.
You don't spell it out.
Right. He doesn't explain the references. He trusts the audience to feel their weight.
He references Lincoln right at the top with 50 years ago, immediately grounding the speech in the legacy of the Gettysburg Address.
Setting the historical stage.
But as he shifts into the sermon portion, he weaves in deep, resonant biblical imagery.
Very heavy biblical references.
He alludes to Isaiah 40.45, deploying the majestic imagery that every valley shall be exalted and every hill and mountain shall be made low.
Yes.
He pulls from Amos 5.24, demanding that justice roll down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. He even alludes to Galatians 3.28 at the end, imagining a world where all are one in Christ Jesus.
And it isn't just religious or political texts either.
Oh.
He seamlessly quotes the opening lines of William Shakespeare's Richard III.
Really?
He takes the famous, "Now is the winter of our discontent," and turns it into the sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent.
That is so clever.
He is pulling from the absolute highest cultural authorities, the Bible, Shakespeare, the Founding Fathers, and aligning their immense cultural weight with the Civil Rights Movement.
To really understand how all these tools work together to create such a massive impact, our sources identify 3 specific rhetorical lenses we can look through:
Yes, these are crucial.
voice merging, prophetic voice, and dynamic spectacle. Let's break those down, starting with voice merging.
Voice merging is a deeply rooted technique, particularly prominent in the African-American preaching tradition.
How does it work?
It is the act of combining your own personal voice with the voices of religious predecessors, excerpts from scripture, and even secular songs or poetry.
Blending it all together.
When King merges his own modern political demands with the ancient words of the prophet Isaiah or with the secular hymn America, he is creating a completely unique, unified voice.
I see.
He is telling the audience, I am not just speaking for myself. I am channeling the moral authority of history and heaven.
That makes so much sense. It gives the words an undeniable gravity.
Exactly.
And the second lens our sources highlight is the prophetic voice. Now, this isn't about predicting the future, right? It's about something else.
Exactly. The prophetic voice in rhetorical analysis involves using language to speak on behalf of an entire population during a time of extreme crisis and urgency.
Okay.
The role of the prophetic voice is to restore a sense of duty, justice, and virtue amidst societal decay.
Calling people out.
Yes. When King declares now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children, he is speaking with the urgent, unyielding moral authority of an Old Testament prophet calling a straying nation back to its core principles.
Finally, there is the concept of dynamic spectacle. And the sources trace this all the way back to the Aristotelian definition of theater.
We have to go back to Aristotle for this one.
Let's make sure we define that clearly so it doesn't just sound like an academic buzzword. What does it mean?
In Aristotle's Poetics, spectacle refers to the visual and sensory elements of a drama. Staging, the costumes, the sheer scale of the event.
The visual.
A dynamic spectacle, in rhetoric, means that the power of the speech relies heavily on the external factors of the situation. The tension in the air, the physical drama of the setting, the conflict that brought everyone there.
So the March on Washington itself was the ultimate dynamic spectacle.
Unmatched.
You have 250,000 people gathered at the monument of the great emancipator.
You have the national tension surrounding the civil rights movement.
The threat of violence, the massive police presence.
All of it. The physical scale and the political stakes of the room provided a dynamic spectacle that elevated his words far beyond what they would have been if he had read them in a quiet radio studio. If we connect this to the bigger picture, what King ultimately did that day was brilliantly mythologize America's founding documents.
He took the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution.
Yes, but he placed them squarely within a spiritual context. He argued that racial justice wasn't just a legal necessity to be debated by lawyers. It was in strict accordance with God's will.
Framing it as a moral imperative.
By doing this, the rhetoric of the speech actually offered a path to redemption for America. He wasn't just demanding rights. He was offering the country a way to save its own soul from its racial sins.
I want you, the listener, to think about the leaders, the speakers, or even the communicators you admire today.
Think about how they speak.
Think about how the really effective ones use these exact same techniques. They use rhythmic repetition to make a point stick in your memory.
They merge secular history with deeper moral authority.
To make their arguments feel undeniable, whether you are leading a movement or just trying to persuade your team in a boardroom, King literally wrote the modern playbook on how to move people.
And it was overwhelmingly effective, which leads us to the immediate ripple effect of the speech.
What happened next?
In the days following August 28th, the triumphs were undeniable and widespread. The acclaimed writer, James Baldwin, who had actually been quite skeptical of the March on Washington beforehand.
Right, fearing it would be too sanitized.
Exactly. He wrote movingly about the experience. He said that during the speech, you could physically feel the passion of the people flowing up to him, and that for a moment, it almost seemed they could make the kingdom real.
The press reaction was also glowing, which was crucial for the movement's goals.
Very crucial.
James Reston of the New York Times wrote a front-page analysis stating that King touched all the themes of the day, only better than anybody else, specifically noting his masterful use of Lincoln, Gandhi, and the Bible.
The Boston Globe's Mary McGrory reported that he moved the crowd as no other.
High praise.
The Washington Post said it rose above mere oratory, and the Los Angeles Times praised his matchless eloquence, calling him a supreme orator who put the advocates of segregation to absolute shame.
And politically, which was the original goal of the grueling logistical nightmare we talked about at the beginning, it was a massive victory.
Huge.
It was hailed as a triumph of managed protest. With over 250,000 people flooding the Capitol, there was not a single arrest related to the demonstration.
0 arrests.
President John F. Kennedy watched the speech on television from the White House. He was deeply impressed by King's delivery and invited the march leaders to the Oval Office immediately afterward.
Kennedy genuinely felt the overwhelming success and peaceful nature of the march bolstered the chances for his civil rights bill to survive Congress. However, history is never monolithic.
Never.
The reaction was not universally positive, and we must look at the critics to understand the full context of the moment. Some black leaders felt the speech, and the march as a whole was far too accommodating to the white political establishment.
Yes, and we need to explicitly state here, we are just impartially reporting the historical record of these views. We aren't taking sides.
Exactly, just providing the facts from the sources. Malcolm X, for instance, offered a fiercely sharp critique.
Looking at the historical record, it is fascinating to see the stark polarization here. We have the president embracing it on one side and prominent figures within the broader movement fiercely critiquing it on the other. What exactly was Malcolm X's objection?
Malcolm X believed the march had been co-opted by the federal government and watered down. In his autobiography, he wrote quite scathingly, "Whoever heard of angry revolutionaries swinging their bare feet together with their oppressor in lily pad pools with gospels and guitars and I have a dream speeches?"
Wow.
He viewed the event as a sanitized, state-approved parade that compromised the legitimate anger and revolutionary spirit of the movement. He called it the farce on Washington.
It shows the deep philosophical divides about how liberation should be achieved. But Malcolm X wasn't the only one alarmed by the speech, and this brings us to one of the most sobering parts of our research today.
It is very sobering.
The speech won over the president and the moderate press, but it also placed a massive systemic target on Dr. King's back from the federal government itself.
This raises an important question about the profound cost of visibility.
Yeah. And again, to reiterate, we are simply reporting the documented historical actions here.
Right. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, under J. Edgar Hoover, viewed King and his allies not as heroes, but as dangerous subversives. The sheer power, reach, and unifying nature of the I Have a Dream speech deeply alarmed the Bureau.
Because it was so effective.
It provoked the FBI to heavily expand their COINTELPRO operation against King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference.
Wait, for listeners who might just know the FBI from modern law enforcement or movies, what exactly was COINTELPRO? This wasn't just them keeping a standard background file on him, right?
Not at all. COINTELPRO stood for Counterintelligence Program. It was a series of covert, aggressive, and often highly illegal projects conducted by the FBI aimed at surveilling, infiltrating, discrediting, and disrupting domestic political organizations.
Disrupting them how?
It involved wiretapping, psychological warfare, blackmail, and attempting to destroy the personal lives and reputations of civil rights leaders. The FBI essentially operated as a secret police force against domestic activists.
And the I Have a Dream speech was a direct catalyst for escalating this illegal surveillance against King.
Yes. Just 2 days after the speech, Agent William C. Sullivan, the head of COINTELPRO, wrote a terrifyingly blunt internal memo.
What did it say?
I will quote his words directly from the historical record. "Personally, I believe in the light of King's powerful demagogic speech yesterday, he stands head and shoulders above all other Negro leaders put together when it comes to influencing great masses of Negroes. We must mark him now, if we have not done so before, as the most dangerous Negro of the future in this nation from the standpoint of communism, the Negro, and national security."
That is absolutely chilling to read.
It is.
2 days after delivering a message of unity, peace, and integration, A speech that urged people to not drink from the cup of bitterness and hatred. The FBI internally brands him the most dangerous person in the nation for the future.
The duality of that aftermath is staggering. The very same rhetoric that propelled him to be named Time magazine's Man of the Year in 1963 and made him the youngest person ever to win the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964 simultaneously accelerated a covert, taxpayer-funded government campaign to destroy him.
It is a stark reminder of the immense power of rhetoric. Words that can inspire a nation to change its laws can simultaneously threaten the entrenched power structures to the point of aggressive, paranoid retaliation.
Exactly. When you speak with that much clarity and power, the system reacts. Sometimes it bends to your will, and sometimes it tries to break you.
Now, as we move into the final section of our deep dive today, we have to talk about what happened to the speech after the 1960s.
The afterlife of the speech.
We are going to look at the bizarre, far-reaching, and honestly surprising modern legacy of this speech. And to do that, let's start with a physical artifact. The original typewritten manuscript that King actually read from that day.
The paper itself.
Because the story of where that paper ended up is wild.
It sounds like fiction. As Dr. King finished his speech and was waving goodbye to the massive crowd surrounded by other leaders and reporters, a volunteer security guard standing on the podium simply turned to him.
And what did she do?
He asked if he could keep the original typewritten pages.
Imagine being a college kid, volunteering for security, and you just casually ask for the paper that will become the most famous speech of the century.
A lot of nerve.
That's like asking Leonardo da Vinci if you can keep the napkin he used to sketch the Mona Lisa. And who was this kid?
That security guard was a young man named George Raveling. He happened to be a star college basketball player for the Villanova Wildcats, who had just come down to volunteer for the day.
And King simply handed it to him.
Handed it right over.
Raveling walked away from the Lincoln Memorial with the physical blueprint of arguably the greatest American speech ever given folded up in his pocket.
Unbelievable.
He held on to that document for decades, storing it inside an autobiography of Harry Truman. Over the years, as the historical significance of the paper grew, collectors approached him.
I'm sure they did.
He was offered staggering sums of money for it, reports say up to $3 million.
But he steadfastly refused to sell it, understanding its immeasurable historical and cultural value. He knew it belonged to history, not a private collection.
Where is it now?
Finally, in 2021, Raveling provided the document to his alma mater, Villanova University, under a long-term on-loan arrangement, ensuring it would be preserved, studied, and protected.
It's incredible that a college basketball player had the absolute foresight to ask for the paper in the moment.
A huge piece of luck for historians.
But the physical paper wasn't the only thing being fiercely protected over the years. The words themselves became the center of a massive, protracted legal battle regarding copyright.
This is where the intersection of history and law gets very complicated.
How so?
Because the speech was broadcast to a massive television and radio audience and widely reprinted in newspapers, a massive controversy erupted over its legal copyright status.
Right.
Should words spoken to millions on a public monument belong to the public? This debate culminated in a major 1999 lawsuit. The Estate of Martin Luther King Jr., Inc. v. CBS, Inc.
Let's break down the legal mechanics of this because it sounds counterintuitive to me. How can a speech broadcast on live national television be copyrighted?
The legal argument hinged entirely on the technical difference between a limited publication and a general publication.
Okay, what's the difference?
CBS argued that by delivering the speech on live television to the world, King had engaged in a general publication. If that were true, the speech would have instantly entered the public domain because King had not pre-registered the text with the Register of Copyrights before stepping up to the microphone.
So CBS is arguing he gave it to the world so the world owns it, and we can broadcast it or use it in documentaries without paying licensing fees.
Precisely. However, the King estate fought back, and the court ultimately agreed with them.
Why?
The court established that the performance, even to hundreds of thousands of people in person and millions on TV, only constituted a limited publication.
A limited publication.
Yes, it was delivered to a specific audience for a specific purpose, and the press was only granted limited rights to cover it as news. Therefore, the King estate retained their common law copyright over the speech.
So, under current applicable copyright laws, the "I have a dream" speech is not in the public domain.
It is not.
It will remain under strict copyright protection in the United States for 70 years after Dr. King's death. That means it is legally protected and technically cannot be reproduced without permission through the year 2038.
That is correct. Unlicensed use can sometimes be lawful under specific doctrines, like fair use, for instance, for educational purposes or brief news commentary, but the estate firmly holds the rights and has a history of actively enforcing them to control how the speech is monetized and contextualized.
So what does this all mean? It means that a piece of soaring historical oratory, a profound cry for human rights, is also a strictly guarded legal asset.
It's a dual legacy.
But despite the copyright restrictions, that hasn't stopped the speech from completely permeating global pop culture in ways that are totally unexpected.
It transcended political discourse to become a malleable cultural artifact. It became a piece of shared audio iconography.
Give us an example.
For example, did you know that in the wake of his assassination in 1968, the speech was actually issued as a single on Gordy Records and managed to crack the Billboard Hot 100 chart, peaking at number 88?
I had no idea a political speech could chart on the Billboard Hot 100 next to rock and roll bands and pop singers.
It's extremely rare.
And speaking of music, in the 1990s, we saw the speech heavily sampled across completely different genres.
Yeah, heavily sampled.
The alternative comedy rock band Doug Anthony All-Stars sampled it. In 1992, the electronic band Mood Swings used massive excerpts of the speech in their song Spiritual High Part 3.
That same year, the rock band Extreme incorporated parts of the earlier Detroit Cobo Hall speech, the I Have a Dream refrain he tested there, into their track, Peacemaker Die.
Wow.
The words became part of the musical fabric of entirely new generations who weren't even born in 1963. The rhythm of his delivery was so inherently musical that producers treated his voice like a lead instrument.
And the official commemorations just keep evolving alongside the pop culture ones?
They do.
In 2002, the Library of Congress added the recording to the National Recording Registry, cementing it as an audio treasure. If you visit Washington, D.C. today, you can walk around the Tidal Basin and see the 2011 Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial.
A beautiful monument.
The massive 30-foot granite centerpiece of that memorial is called the Stone of Hope. That is a direct, literal, visual representation of a single line from the improvised section of the speech. Out of a mountain of despair, a stone of hope.
And the recognition continues to permeate everyday life. In 2016, the U.S. Treasury even announced that the back of the $5 bill would undergo a redesign to depict historical events that took place at the Lincoln Memorial, explicitly including an image from King's speech, cementing his legacy onto American currency.
But perhaps the most surprising and honestly slightly surreal example of its modern legacy occurred just recently in 2021.
This one is wild.
Time magazine partnered with Epic Games to create a fully interactive educational exhibit dedicated to the speech. And where did they build this interactive exhibit?
You wouldn't expect it.
Inside the massive multiplayer video game Fortnite Creative to mark the 58th anniversary of the event.
It is a profound testament to how versatile and enduring the speech truly is. The core message and the emotional resonance of the words are so strong that they can survive in any medium.
Truly any medium.
The speech can resonate powerfully in a historic, burned-down Baptist church in Georgia. It can echo in the halls of Congress. It can be sampled over a drum beat in a 90s rock song, or it can be experienced by teenagers walking around through digital avatars in a modern battle royale video game.
It's absolutely wild to trace that journey from a blank page to a digital server. Let's do a quick summary of what we've unpacked today.
Sounds good.
We started with a deeply stressed, exhausted civil rights team in a sweltering New York hotel room, terrified of the logistical nightmare of the March on Washington, trying to patch together a formal, calming address called Normalcy Never Again.
We tracked the dream motif from its early tests in North Carolina and Detroit.
And saw how King absorbed and borrowed brilliance from his advisors, politicians, and fellow activists like young Prathia Hall.
We stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial as King read his script about a bad check, only to hear Mahalia Jackson shout over the crowd, prompting King to cast the paper aside and deliver an improvised, sermonic masterpiece built on ancient rhetoric and profound moral clarity.
We saw how that incredible improvisation won the hearts of the press and the president, drew the sharp critique of Malcolm X, and placed King squarely in the terrifying crosshairs of the FBI's surveillance apparatus.
The dual nature of visibility.
And finally, we followed the physical manuscript into the pocket of a college basketball player, and the words themselves into copyright courts, the Billboard charts, stone monuments, and even a Fortnite server.
It is a journey that proves history is rarely as neat, tidy, or inevitable as the textbooks suggest. History is messy, It is deeply collaborative, it is highly contested in the moment, and it is constantly evolving in how we remember it.
Exactly. And that brings us to our final provocative thought for you to mull over today. We've talked extensively about how the most iconic lines of the 20th century, the words carved into granite monuments, protected by federal copyright, and studied by millions of people across the globe, were not in the final approved script.
They were.
They were a spontaneous, immediate, deeply human reaction to a friend shouting encouragement from the background. I want you to consider your own life. Consider how much of history, and perhaps how much of your own life's greatest, most impactful moments, relies not on having the perfect plan, the flawless presentation, or the meticulously written script.
Sometimes you have to let go.
Instead, maybe true greatness relies on having the ultimate courage to abandon that script entirely, trust your years of preparation and your instincts, and speak directly from the heart when the moment demands it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.